Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and of course, today I'm joined. Oh, that's Aiden Buhner, and today we're here to talk about Nintendo Switch 2, a video game system that we played with our very own hands, eyes, ears, and other senses. Abram, the Switch 2 is something that very few people have experienced because, frankly, we've really only learned a substantial amount about it about a week ago. And we got to go straight to New York right after the Direct and play it with a lot of people. And we've played a number of the games. We have thoughts about the hardware and our thoughts on what it feels like and what it feels like to play these games that very few people have experienced. So today is our guide for everyone in our community to what we've experienced with Nintendo Switch 2 and how we're feeling about each of these things. And we've got a lot of questions from our community. Of course, if you are not a member of our Discord community, you can join the Discord, which has a link in the description, to ask us probably not future questions about Switch 2, because I think it's going to be a one-time thing. We don't have another first impressions on Switch 2 coming up. But join our Discord to ask us stuff for future videos. Abram, it's time. How are you feeling, in a couple days removed from having played it? We had to push this back a little bit. How are you feeling about the event itself and having played this long-awaited system?
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal. I think what's just so interesting is ultimately how short a window of time we're working with here. Now, obviously, the Switch 1 also had quite a short turnaround, but there we were really going from October to the start of March. But Nintendo condensed down everything here into, it's actually about a 6-month window still.
Same amount,
I think time is moving differently these days.
You're a lot busier now. Got a lot more stuff to do.
Yeah, there's been a patch note in the physics, right? And time is a little bit different. I don't know what I'm talking about. Tucker, I am more excited for Switch 2 in some ways. And in other ways, I think my expectations have been calibrated more accurately.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's the way I would frame it, because ultimately, I think that the hardware is more of a step up in terms of feel than I expected it would be.
Yeah.
I think that the games on offer are not as exciting to me now as when I was just seeing them in directs. In particular, I have more reservations about both Donkey Kong and Mario Kart, having played both of them now, some of which can be attributed to the demos, as we'll talk about, than I had just seeing the trailers for them. I think the only thing, frankly, I'm glowing on after our hands-on is Prime 4, and indeed Prime 4 coming to Switch 1. So I think that puts us, at least puts me in an interesting position, sort of sharing out my thoughts on the system and sort of the urgency for people to rush out and buy it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said about it feeling surreal. I think the real reason it feels surreal, and this is where I agree with you, and I think this is maybe where your mindset was when you were mentioning what a quick turnaround it was. Is because we learned about these games, and then less than 48 hours later, we were playing. That's the surreal part. It's holy shit. I mean, that's never happened to us before. We've never been like at E3 or Summer Game Fest where things are announced and you're immediately playing them. And obviously, we're also not press in that way, so we don't have an extensive history with events like this. And so it does feel like we're like on the in group, on the inside of this crazy thing that a few people have gotten a chance to do. Of course, there will be more hands-on events going. There's a LA one I think coming up. They're all across the globe for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I think you make a great point about. I'm really excited to have this system and be able to today answer a lot of questions that people might not be as clear on what the experience is actually like. But I think it's good to sort of temper what we're saying in nothing that we did at Switch 2, even Prime 4, as we'll get to, which, as you're saying, is your biggest takeaway from this, felt completely revolutionary. I think this Switch 2 is a lot of small changes adding up to something that feels substantially more premium and like a different vibe that Nintendo is bringing to a next generation system than they were in previous generations. But there wasn't anything that I was crazy about here. It was all just cool with some asterisks, with some I'm interested to get this in a more substantial way when I can actually play the game for myself, or I'm interested to see more trailers, or this Mario Kart Direct coming up. Because I also think that most of the games shown were not great demos. I think they were just about as good for demos as you can get for those kind of games. But most of my problems with the games that I played were just that they will be a lot better when I have it for myself, when I can take my time with them, when I have a greater sense of what the scope of any of these projects is going to be, when I have a little more context for the development history and things like that. But this is also, again, this is something I have no experience with. It's just like diving straight in and giving like impressions based on like 10 minutes of gameplay in most of these cases. But we are able to, because we're some of the few people who have played these, answer a lot of questions, and we've got a lot of those from our audience. So I think walking through the correct questions will actually prompt me to have a better understanding. Because frankly, I've been so busy trying to get home. I had a crazy travel experience on the other end.
Yeah.
That I haven't really been thinking too much about this, but I'm really excited to sort of dive into the specifics, because I can answer specifics about a lot of these. I just can't be like, here's how you should feel about it, because I only got 10 minutes with any given game or project.
100%. And I think that's one other key caveat I'll put on here, and then we'll get into it in a more specific way. Let's be clear about something, folks. I would pay any amount of money to have the Switch 2 at launch. Let's be clear about that. We don't know what the price post-have is going to be. I will pay any amount of money. Mm-hmm. It's the history of Nintendo, the Nintendo community, the games. It's all deeply important to me. Yeah. So my view on a very subjective level is that I absolutely cannot wait for June 5th. I can't even put into words how excited I am. Yeah. But I think it's important, especially because it is going to be a harder thing to get. It's going to be a big purchase, that there is a degree of fairness to what we're saying here. And I think really give the pros and the cons as people are looking towards that purchase in terms of not only what's on offer, but if day one is the day that you need to be on board.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's actually a good question to start with to sort of ease us in here. Rikali, our goat Rikali, asked a ton of very good questions, but there is one here that I really loved and I think kicks off the conversation in a good way. Rikali said, how well would you say that all of these games and features come together as a launch or launch window experience compared to Switch 1 this early at this point in its lead up to release? I know it's not out yet, but these are all things they're pushing close to Switch 2's launch, referring to the various games we'll be talking about here. And I'm curious to hear your perspectives on that. And I think this is an important place to begin with, because we did get to play everything that Nintendo is putting out at launch. Correct. Obviously, Mario Kart. We got to play the Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Yeah. We got to see a lot of the day one multi-platform games, including Cyberpunk and Street Fighter. And I also played GameCube Online.
You did.
So,
and I played Yakuza.
Yeah, everything.
Was launch.
We'll talk about the edition stuff later, but everything that's really, well, I just said GameCube, so it's not everything that's new at release, but these sort of high-level items, we experienced all of them. And I'm curious, Tucker, what you make of this. If you feel like when you boot up your system on June 5th, based on what we did in New York, you're going to feel satisfied by what's on offer.
No. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But this is all under a major caveat, as we'll get into Mario Kart. That is the big thing at launch. I'm not historically a Mario Kart guy. I did really enjoy my time with World, as we'll talk about. But it feels very limited to me as someone who is not only a heavy Nintendo gamer, but does already play a lot of multi-platform and other platform games. None of the third-party support at launch is compelling to me at all. I've played Split Fiction, I've played Cyberpunk, and I have access to basically all of these games, except for maybe Yakuza, in a superior version that I own on Steam or my PlayStation or my Xbox through Game Pass, through PS Plus. And there's not even the fun third-party exclusive that Super Bomberman R was, which wasn't a great game, but I got that around launch, and I think... If I'm thinking back to Switch launch, I, of course, got Breath of the Wild, but I also had 1-2 Switch, Super Bomberman R, Snipper Clips, and I think that might have been it for me. But that was a grouping of 4 games that was multiplayer, single player, huge time investment. There isn't that variety for me at launch with Switch 2 that I'm a little bit disappointed by. Yeah. I'm satisfied enough with the wider gaming ecosystem to where it's not going to be a problem to me that Mario Kart may not be my favorite game, even though it's the one to have at launch. I know it's a smart business decision because in June, in July, I'm going to be playing Death Stranding 2. I'm going to be playing Lost Soul Aside. Like, I'm going to have all these different games to where it's not going to kill me to not have a major Nintendo game that I'm really in love with at launch of this system. But I don't think that it adds up to the Switch 1's launch, because the Switch 1, I think, not in terms of quantity and quality, I think the Switch 2 has, because you can also play Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild in better versions. You're going to have the GameCube games. You're going to have a lot of much more solid third-party support. Switch 2 launch, I think, is on like a wider level better, but on a subjective level, it has less that I am interested and curious to explore, because a lot of the things on offer are things that I already have experienced, even the 2 Zelda games, obviously.
Yeah, I think that this launch is different from all of Nintendo's others in a meaningful way, insofar that there's not only continuity through backwards compatibility, but a lot of the games on Switch 1 are still very relevant, right? So getting your Switch 2 is really continuing your Switch 1 experience. And I think that was sort of a big takeaway I had just in how similar a lot of things felt.
Sure.
For me personally, I have hesitations about some aspects of Mario Kart, as we'll talk about, but in the main, I know I'm going to adore this game. I know it's a game that Jean and I are going to play literally for the next 10 years. I've played Mario Kart 8. I would say if you average it out at a weekly cadence for 11 years, right? So for me, Mario Kart World is a sort of killer app, all I need at launch type of game. Yeah. But I also feel like the launch, as you're saying, that some of its parts is in my view, definitely weaker than other Nintendo launches. There was a lot of speculation kind of before the Direct about what are going to be the games that sort of satisfy the key Nintendo launch pillars of big single-player experience, some sort of fun multiplayer co-op thing, and then an experimental title of some variety. It seems like Mario Kart is supposed to fill 2 of those bills, and I think once the Direct happens, that will probably make a little bit more sense, be a little bit clearer. But no, I don't think
that's next week, by the way. That's
which is cool.
We will of course be live reacting to that. I'm very curious.
I think ultimately this is not, to me, on the level of a launch like with Wii, which I think was an exceptional launch. Sure. Even a launch like Switch. Yeah, that's really the main reason I say that. A launch like Switch, obviously Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart games have a similar tier to an extent. But I think Breath of the Wild is the more monumental title between the two, obviously. And I really did like having 1-2 Switch, and for me, I didn't get snipper clips. I got Fast RMX, and I am getting a new Fast game at the launch of this system, which is cool. Although there's been so little said or shown about it, I don't understand why. It's not even a full trailer. There's only those couple seconds of footage.
Very weird.
But I agree with you in the main. I think that it's not I think it's a lineup that is good in terms of continuity, in terms of it being more, in a broad sense, Nintendo Switch, right? I don't think it is Nintendo rubber stamping the start of a new generation in the strongest way that they could.
Yeah, because it also is existing in a larger ecosystem now. They're not dropping Switch. There are 2 more major, at least, Switch 1 games coming out this year that are now cross-gen in ZA and Prime 4. And what is new on Switch 2 is the first new Mario Kart game that Switch never got, and GameCube games which Switch never got, and major third-party support which Switch only partially got. And so there is new stuff, but each of those 3 things, of course, we are both excited for Mario Kart. There isn't as much Switch 2 specific stuff that is grabbing us in particular, because we're also people that have a vested interest in the wider gaming ecosystem and not just Nintendo. But we did, again, play basically everything that was there at launch. And so what do you want to start with? Hardware? That's where our journey started.
Yeah, let's do that. When we came into the show, they sort of had us in this kind of waiting area, and you could actually pick up the Switch, you could take the Joy-Con off, you could put them back on, you could look at the packaging, and just sort of generally oogle and ogle the system.
Yes.
And we have a number of questions here about the hardware.
Yeah.
And
so this is going to be not only the hardware in terms of what you call our feel was in that first area, but also as we were playing the game, talking about mouse controls, talking about Pro Controller, talking about the Joy-Con 2s. This is our hardware section here.
Yeah, we have a question here that is unnamed here. Does the Switch feel more comfortable in handheld? Was that a question from
They're
Rikali?
yeah, they're all Rickley. All those ones.
Okay, the ones at the bottom are Rikali. Okay,
I
shout out
think so.
Rikali again. I think this is a good broad question to start with.
Yeah.
Um, what did you make of the feel of the system? Because we got to play it in both handheld and portable mode.
Barely. We played one game
Yeah.
in handheld. We played one of our Mario Kart races in handheld. Everything else was mostly Pro Controller on TVs, just in terms of the various setups. But my thoughts on it as handheld are I think the least. They're the least important to the overall package.
Sure.
Than any of the other form factors that Switch 2 can be put into. Because holding it in handheld, and again, playing very limited amount in handheld, it was great. It really, I don't think, feels that different. The Joy-Con 2, I think, are the thing that does feel a little bit more substantial in terms of their size and especially stick size. Though that, again, that I think that applies, my thoughts on that apply a little more heavily towards grip mode. But the screen looks great. It's very, very vibrant. I actually think that a game like Mario Kart, it looks great in both modes, but I felt a lot more color in the handheld mode. So it is a fantastic, more premium version, but it is not a revolution, and I wasn't expecting it to be. But I do like it quite a bit, and I'm planning on playing it in that mode quite a bit. But it's the element of Switch 2 versus Switch 1 where I could have been at least somewhat convinced that it was not much of an upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to this is predicated in part on something that we got our friend Chris Char said.
Yeah.
Chris is asking about, he says, with so many PC handhelds out now that have built-in grips in the back, Steam Deck, ROG Ally, etc., seems like the Switch 2 doesn't have any. Does this increased size of the Switch 2 help with the comfort, or we still probably need to get a grip when playing in handheld mode? So I have been a vocal advocate of my view that not only are handhelds too big, but the Steam Deck in particular, which I have and like a lot, is uncomfortable. Sure. But I have to say, I was really pleasantly surprised. Yeah. And I think that it is indeed quite a comfortable system. I think a lot of my issue with the way that the Steam Deck feels that it is a very thick, very chunky item. And the Switch 2 actually keeps a very similar profile to the first one. It's actually the same thickness. Yes. It's just simply...
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it's just simply bigger.
If they had said, okay, it's like half a centimeter or whatever bigger, we would have been like, well, of course, you got to put all sorts of stuff in it. But they're like, no, it's the same size. Like, what do you mean?
Well, I think it's because people, I do feel, will be surprised when they see exactly how big it is in terms of surface area when they get it. It's a big, chunky unit. And obviously, they've just simply had the new tech expand outwards instead of in thickness. But the result for me is, I think, a system that is more comfortable. Again, limited time in the hand.
Yeah, very limited.
Mostly TV mode, but I really appreciate how much sturdier it feels. I was even I was playing my OLED on the way home on the train,
so I was like,
and I have an issue with my right Joy-Con where the latching mechanism is a little bit loose. So if I put a little too much pressure with my palm, my Joy-Con will pop up and it will disconnect. Mm-hmm. This system
on your Switch OLED?
Yeah.
Damn, that sucks.
Yeah,
my Switch my original Switch definitely had that, but not my OLED.
I mean, I basically only play in portable mode, and I have a lot of pressure when I'm holding it. So I think but so
what were you playing that got you so...
Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door.
Oh. Well, okay.
I think that the Switch 2 feels very smart and considered in the ways that it improves the hardware by the Joy-Con actually slotting in. The magnets feel very sturdy. There's no sort of give to the system. There's no sliding up or down. It's just a very solid unit, and I think it feels better in the hand. The material is nice and premium. Sure. It's a lot of small things that to me add up to something that feels less or more substantial. How about? Because I already think that the Switch 1 feels good, but I think this feels a lot better.
Yeah. And again, it's small things that add up. And for me, the Joy-Con 2 being just longer makes them fill your hands in a lot more satisfying way. I'm personally a big fan of how small the Joy-Con are just in general, but I'm not going to want to use Joy-Con 1 after I have the access to Joy-Con 2, because not only are they longer, which makes the when you put them into the grip feel great. I mean, I was really surprised by how much I actually liked the Joy-Con grip, which again I already like on Switch 1, but it feels a lot more usable to the point where I can imagine people not being as interested in investing in a Pro Controller this time around, because that Joy-Con 2 in the Joy-Con 2 grip is very satisfying. And the sticks are also just a little bit bigger. You definitely can feel it. I think the buttons are about the same size. Maybe they're a little bit larger. But yeah, I like the Joy-Con 2 quite a bit. In just that they just feel more sturdy because of the magnets. So that's definitely a big plus for me.
100%. Rikli asked about that as well, and I echo everything you said. I think that's a much better size controller. My hands, my hands hurt when I'm playing games sometimes. It's just, and my wrists do. It's not always the most comfortable. The bigger size for me is really, really excellent. Rikli also asked about the Pro Controller. There's really nothing to say about the Pro Controller. The programmable GR, GL grip buttons are cool. Some games...
They're not for us.
No. And some games apparently are going to have like profiles that developers can map, and maybe that is interesting, but largely they're flexible for you to map as you see fit. But because that Pro Controller is so expensive, because it doesn't feel that much different other than like nuance, like the start and select buttons, the plus and minus feel a bit different. By and large, I'm just going to use my Pro Controllers for Switch 1 because they're compatible. I don't see a need to buy that.
No. Yeah, that was definitely one thing where I'm like, okay, it is better, but by such a comparatively small margin to where it's not something that I have any interest in investing in. And the Switch 1 Pro Controller is completely compatible, so I like it. I probably will have one at some point in my life, but it is very much a low interest. I'm not going to be going out and getting one, especially not at launch when I've got other things money-wise to focus on. Yes?
I was going to say, let's talk about the mouse. I mean, this is the
big... This is the big mouse and motion controls are the last two sort of things.
Yeah, and they kind of go hand in hand.
The motion controls is important to point out that we don't know because we didn't use them. There were no games that used motion controls in like a pointer way or like an arms way.
I think, yes, however, Prime 4... Hold on. The problem with Switch... One's motion control is that it has no sensor bar. So if you're playing Pikmin 3 Deluxe, you're playing Galaxy, you're playing anything that involves pointing, you're going to start drifting really, really far. Because they're trying to do motion via gyroscope and kind of trying to emulate what the Wii did with IR. Yeah. The motion on this system, it comes from the mouse. And the mouse is, to your question, Rikli, 100% accurate. It is as accurate or more accurate than the Wii Remote because that is 100% positional. It's like using a computer mouse, and this is going to be how motion works. And to that end, I think that mouse... Here's my view of mouse con stuff, because also Adam asked a question here about whether it feels gimmicky or it feels viable. We've got another question to the effect. I think that the mouse stuff is so precise and so... intuitive. You simply, when you're playing Prime, you use the stick, you're holding your Joy-Con like this, you rotate it flat, and immediately it's in mouse mode. It is amazing. For me, personally, it's extremely uncomfortable.
Sure.
That's my view of mouse control. What do you think about mouse control?
We only got to use it for two things. Or no, you know what? That's not true. We got to use it for more than that. You know what? I've retracted what I said. I didn't use it enough to know how my hand will be able to enjoy it over long play sessions, especially because, and here's the really interesting quibble about MouseCon. I think it works very well. I was surprised by, for me, how immediately intuitive it was. How, for me, immediately it was decently comfortable, not uncomfortable, not amazing. But they had us playing this in setups that were designed for using it at a mouse. We were standing there and we had a big mouse pad. It's going to be a very different use case when we're actually using it for the actual system, especially when you're playing something like the Mario Party Jamboree TV mode games that are mouse controlled mini games. In what situation are you going to have enough space for people to use these? They say you can use them on your leg. I never tried that. It's going to be interesting to see how we feel about MouseCon in the wild. Frankly, we were in a very curated environment where it was the optimal situation for the optimal way to play these games with mouse controls. And it's not going to be that way at all when we have the system ourselves. So for the specifically curated event, I thought it was very accurate. I thought it worked great. I thought it was very, very intuitive. And they showed us different ways that it can be used. First-person controls in Prime 4, mini games in Mario Party, a little bit of that in the Welcome Tour, and then of course Dragon Drive, which is all mouse controls.
Yeah.
So I use it in a bunch of different ways, but I don't know how it's going to be when I'm actually using it when I have a Switch 2, because it's going to be a different, very different location-based thing.
Yeah, and I'll complicate this more because I think it's important that you're raising that we use it in many different applications. For me, a lot of the problem with Prime 4 was that I was still being asked to use the face buttons. Yeah. And so I think a large part of why my wrist was hurting was because I'm using a narrow thing on its edge, and I'm still trying to use fingers down here and fingers up here. And that immediately hurt my hand. What didn't so much is when I'm playing a mini game or even playing Dragon Drive, where I am touching the shoulder and trigger buttons, but not the face buttons, really.
Sure.
That was more comfortable for me. And I think that there's more utility there. I'm really excited about this game that Nitrome just announced for Switch 2 called Mousework. Because that to me is seeming like it's using the mouse controller to do something that you couldn't just do with gyro. The reason I raised that is because when I'm playing Prime 4, I'm going to be sitting down to maybe play for 2 hours at a time, 3 hours at a time, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to want to be holding my Pro Controller for that. And even though the mouse control was so precise for like shooting the boss's weak points, we'll talk about this more later, ultimately, I think gyro in the pinch there will do the trick. And I'll use...
Yeah, which is probably going to be in Prime,
100%.
We didn't get a chance to try that, but...
No, but it was in Prime Remastered, so I don't think any option in Remastered wouldn't be in 4. But the point is, I think where I was most interested in the mouse, where it felt most comfortable, is where it was a simpler usage and a usage that was more unique. So yeah, I think my feelings on the mouse are more nuanced than there's a lot of like, oh, we just love the mouse. But I think you make a great point, Tucker, because even the Mario Party stuff, like me and John, we play Switch in bed, right? And so are we supposed to get like a little thing you put on your lap, like if you're eating dinner in bed, like a breakfast in bed little table to play these games? What's the idea here? I think you're right. This is curated environment. I think it's important that everybody realizes that what we played was curated by Nintendo very, 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 very carefully.
To show us what this is in the best possible scenario.
Yes.
And just a quick story about Welcome Tour. I did actually have one of the Joy-Con on my Welcome Tour thing. It kind of messed up. It wasn't working right. I give Nintendo enough leeway to say things go wrong in any given scenario. The people that were there were trying their best to fix it. They ultimately did relatively quickly. Took them a couple of minutes. But there was an issue. They did have to reset the system. Resetting the system seems like it fixed the Joy-Con. I mean, I don't really know how that works, but just so everyone knows, it is very possible that once we have Joy-Con with Joy-Con 2 with the mouse mode, and it's out to millions and millions of people, it is possible they aren't perfect and that they do get weird drift or they don't quite pick things up correctly. If you get a little dirt or grit on the sensor, because it is an IR sensor on the side of the Joy-Con, maybe it won't work properly. So I think there is going to be some getting used to with that, and people sort of exploring and learning where it works and where it doesn't, and how to fix things if it goes wrong. But I wasn't that upset about my Welcome Tour thing being extended by a few minutes because it went wrong. I'm like, we're humans. It's tech. Like, things go wrong. But it is possible that when we actually have it, and it's not in the optimal scenario, that they aren't perfect and that they do have consistent issues. So just something to keep in mind.
One other just miscellaneous thing, hardware related, I want to say, then we'll get into the games. I thought the screen on the Switch 2 and handheld was very beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was something I was concerned about because I love my OLED Switch. I love my OLED Steam Deck screen. Yeah. But
I remember sitting next to you playing my Steam Deck and looking over your OLED Steam Deck, and I felt like a fucking cuck. I was like, Man.
OLED is amazing technology, but LCD technology has gotten so good since Switch 1 came out, or even base Steam Deck, right? That the difference, I don't think, is that stark at all. Maybe when I really put them next to each other, got both units, and I'm looking back and forth, up and down like a fool, comparing colors, I'll notice. But I thought it was a very colorful, very vibrant screen. Nothing felt washed out. Really great saturation on Mario Kart. I thought it was beautiful.
And it is 1080, which even the Switch OLED's OLED screen, which looks great, it is literally much higher resolution than Switch 2 screen. So that, I think, is why people maybe won't care so much about the OLED or being an LCD screen and not an OLED screen, is because it is a better screen. It doesn't have the OLED saturation, but it's a much higher quality screen than the Switch OLED one is.
Tucker, let's start talking about some games here.
Gaming.
I think there's one that people want us to talk about the most just based on the volume of questions, and that's Dragon Drive.
No, we got no questions about Dragon Drive. I was scrolling through our list here. I'm like, nope, he's fucking with me. This is a bit. No one cares about Dragon Drive.
Let's talk about Dragon Drive, though, because it's been feeling very enigmatic, and it's actually the game that I think we demoed Donkey Kong for longer, but there was a very substantial demo of Dragon Drive, where you sit down. Yeah, you play a long tutorial.
There's a substantial tutorial for Dragon Drive.
That's a good way to put it. You sit down, you spend probably about a little bit less than 10 minutes, I would say, pushing your Joy-Con 2 around, getting a feel for it. And then you jump into a 3-on-3 match. You play one match, and you rotate out. I have 3 words to describe Dragon Drive, folks.
Dragon Drive.
Tiring.
Okay.
Nauseating.
Ooh.
And perplexing.
Sure.
I think Dragon Drive, from what we have seen and played, is terrible. I don't know how else to put it. Unfortunately, I don't even see the vision. I have no idea what Dragon Drive's reason for being is, and I thought it was extremely uncomfortable to play.
Yeah, I really do agree. I think this is the kind of weird Nintendo shit that I respect, as I said in our conversation post the Direct, because no one else is willing to put any budget into something like this. But now, having played it myself, and again, operating off of very limited knowledge, we don't know the release date, we don't know the team, we don't know the modes, we don't know the pricing. Having played a little over 10 minutes of it, and again, this game not demoing well, because most of the time we spent was doing this really annoying and kind of finicky tutorial that I think set a very bad taste in your mouth at first. I do think, and I wonder if you agree with this, actually playing the match was way better. It was like 5 times better than the tutorial. The tutorial was slow and boring and needed to do like one specific thing at a time. But playing the game, I'm like, okay, this is decently fun. Like, I'm slamming into people. I'm yelling to Bo to pass a thing across the court. I actually do like the lift up your hand and shoot it like that. I think that's kind of fun. And so playing the actual match-based game was the best part of that, which is a compliment to the game. But it is also a very low bar because, as you're saying, most of the time we spent was doing this really slow and annoying tutorial. And then also, it was tiring. You're 100% right. You have to continually do this. Your character only moves like a tenth of the court or whatever when you do it one time. And so in order to get anywhere or do anything, you're constantly going boop, 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 boop. And it creates some strain here. I mean, we're going to get, I say we, but it's probably just going to be me, are going to get substantial muscle growth from this activity. But no, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking with this. I think it is, the intent is obviously what can we do with 2 mice. And I like that someone, even if it isn't turning out great the first time, is willing to experiment with dual mouse controls and seeing how that can expand video game design. This is designed unlike any other video game that I've played in terms of control, which is something that you and I are always kind of interested in looking back, is controls have become so standardized. I do actually think that Switch 2's Joy-Con 2, with a mixture of motion controls, mouse controls, and controller controls, is going to be a totally interesting breeding ground for new ways to design and control video games. Drag and Drive is one of those, but it isn't a great one of those. This isn't being introduced to the gamepad or the Wii Remote or DS controls and immediately getting why this is something that can be used in many ways. This was not a good introduction to dual mouse control design, even though I think it's compelling and I'm interested to learn more, and I will certainly be purchasing it because I appreciate when Nintendo does something experimental. Even I was not particularly sold on this demo for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the game is, to me it's not showing off what MouseCon can do as much as it is proposing one use case that to me feels very flawed. And I think that's a big difference between like 100%. It in a 1-2 Switch or it in a Game & Wario or whatever, insert whatever your favorite tech demo skewing game is. I think that we talk about practicality, right? You're going to need a lot of space to play this game. You know, I'm really extending my whole arm across this mouse pad and table Nintendo has set up. And you need to do that to get the most speed, right? So is my thigh even long enough? Yeah. You know, am I going to have to be halfway down my shin playing Drag and Drive? And so...
No, your thigh's definitely long enough.
Yeah, I'm fucking around. Yeah. I actually have... My body's built really interestingly because my knee is only about maybe 8 inches below my pelvis.
Jesus Christ. So yeah, no, that was one of the...
Yeah.
least takeaways from it because we saw how it worked. It worked in the way that they said it. The demo was the trailer was very indicative of what we played in the demo.
Yes.
There's still like 5 or 6 questions that will really impact what this game actually is at launch. But I still think no matter how those questions are answered, I sincerely doubt. Unless this has a ton of maps we haven't seen, a ton of modes we haven't seen, maybe different, visual skin palettes that you can change if you want, or button controls especially. Those could save this game, but I doubt it. I think that no matter which way they answer these questions, no one's going to be interested.
Yeah, Nintendo recently said there's more content in Drag and Drive, which, I certainly hope there is. So we'll see. That was definitely the one game that I was overtly negative on.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk very briefly here, Tucker, about Welcome Tour, because we did get a question from Chris Char, who asks, does Welcome Tour seem like it has a lot of content? Any estimate for how long it might be? Obviously, the latter is harder for you to answer, but based on what you played...
Did you play it?
I didn't play it. I was waiting in line. I saw that the demo seemed like it took a while, and I left the line to play Mario Strikers.
Yeah.
But... let's reframe the question a little bit, Tucker, from does it seem like it has a lot of content to does the type of content on offer that you got to experience seem like it's going to justify the $10 price tag? Or I guess more specifically, because $10, frankly, is not that much money, does it justify the time you'd have to put in?
Yeah, time is actually an interesting way to frame that because time, length, and content here is different in this context of this game than it is in this software than it is in any other game. Yeah. Because I played Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour for a little over 10 minutes, which was one of the, as you said, one of the more substantial demos that we did. And the things that I did were very tech demo. They were the things shown off in the trailer. I think if you've watched the trailer and kind of understand this game on a large level, you'll understand the things that I experimented with. The interesting thing that I'm very curious to see is how far it goes, because from what I was doing, I think I did 5 or 6 different little tech demo-y things, and they're presented in this fun little Nintendo Switch 2 world where you're talking to characters, and there are little hidden secrets you can find and stuff. And they were filling out this stamp board of the different, and each one had like medals you can earn based on how good you did. In terms of number of challenges, that's not going to be an issue here. These stamp boards for each particular area are like 20 deep, and there are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. There are 12 areas. And so there could conceivably be like over 100 different little tech demo-y things for you to do, and it's possible that some of the ones later down the line are actually more gamified. So I think you're probably going to be spending, if you really want to 100% this game and get each of the medals and see all the areas, I think you're actually going to be spending easily 5 or 6, 7 hours in this game just to sort of explore all of it, whether or not that remains engaging for that long, because it is still a relatively dry, straightforward tech demo-y thing where there doesn't seem to be a lot of design continuity, because it's more about the breadth of the hardware rather than honing in on one specific thing. I think it will have content enough in terms of what is in the game to justify $10. But I don't think people will care. And I don't think because people won't care, it won't be worth that $10 to most people. Not because there isn't enough to do just in terms of time, but in terms of interest. I don't think it's there.
Yeah, I agree. I said in other discussions we've done, this feels like it's very clearly Nintendo EPD4 because it is largely aping a side mode from Nintendo Labo, where they did similar hardware teardowns and explanations for what was inside Switch 1. The reason I left the line is because of exactly what you're saying. For me, that's not exciting in any way, really. The reason that I love the more hardware-minded Nintendo games, even like a 1-2 Switch, which we both think is a great game, is because it sort of reaches the same conclusion, but with a far more engaging premise, right?
Yeah.
When you play Ball Count, you understand how acutely good HD Rumble is, for instance.
And HD Rumble 2 with the Maraca thing is better than HD Rumble. But I want to do Ball Count too. I don't want to do Shake a Maraca for... It says Shake the Maraca like 100 times, and so you just go...
Yeah.
And it's like... That's one of the like challenges, is to do that. And so like... I don't know.
It feels like Nintendo Labo is so interesting because it's both a game but also this really interesting like STEM learning tool.
Yeah, 100%.
I think breaking out the STEM tool into this is peculiar. I like that you sort of ice skate across the top of the Nintendo Switch too, because it reminds me of like the battle mode tracks in old Mario Kart games where you played on top of the 100%. System, and that's cute. But I don't even think I'm gonna buy this. It's not totally like fair. It's not a pricing concern for me. It's a time concern. I can do so many things with this time. I understand. Yeah. This is what's tricky. I understand the hardware inside the Switch 2, right? This product, it feels like a product that only hardcore Nintendo fans would buy, but the hardcore Nintendo fans already implicitly understand what's going on inside the system. So I'm a little... The creative concept bothers me far more than the price tag. How about?
Sure. Yeah, and I think neither one bothers me because I am fascinated by this in the way that I'm fascinated by Dragon Drive. Not that I expect to love it, but I expect, I know that I'm going to get it and see what there is to offer, because I do like when Nintendo does these weird things, and this is going to be a curio. And so I would rather be on the ground floor for the curio. Like people that tried Project Giant Robot or whatever when it was on the E3 show floor. Like, this is a little bit different, but this is how I kind of see it. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I was there for Project Giant Robot, 10 years ago at E3 when I was in fucking diapers or whatever. I wore diapers all the way to high school, so it's not a small time frame. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try it, and then I'll be able to tell you what it's like, and you'll be like, yup, I expected that. Though to be fair, the one thing that I'm going to be interested to see is, as I said, there are 12 areas. They're each based off of different elements of the system. And so it's Joy-Con L, Joy-Con R, screen, then it gets into presumably dock, game cartridge, maybe you're going inside the system. I think there might be a little more actual variety than we have seen, because when the areas go from A to L, I'm like, I can't even name 12 things. So like clearly they came up with shit that I'm not thinking about. But I'm like, maybe you're like traveling inside the HDMI cord. I mean, it might be kind of cute in terms of like the wider scope of the package, but it's not. It doesn't leave a strong initial impression.
Let's keep sort of escalating in excitement. How about?
Sure.
Let's talk about Nintendo Switch 2 editions here.
Because
we have
any of them.
We played
Mario Party. Yes,
Mario Party.
Yeah.
We have a broad question here from Adam, who says, when it comes to Switch 2 Edition games, how big is the difference between Switch and Switch 2 versions of the same game? I saw a clip of Tears of the Kingdom, and people were really selling it, but I couldn't tell the difference. It would be cool to see whether you're blown away by the improvements or whether it's a small thing. So, we both played Mario Party Jamboree, plus Jamboree TV, and they also had on offer Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. and also Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Yeah, Starcross World.
Plus Starcross World.
Well, they had the Starcross World part.
Yeah, Kirby the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Starcross World.
Yeah. Fuck.
Well, technically,
we played
Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I observed Kirby. I didn't play it. I love Forgotten Land. I'm gonna play the Starcross Worlds thing, but the demo for me of Starcross Worlds was the 20 hours of the game I played 3 years ago, right? Yeah. So I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I guess it looks better. This is this is my overarching feeling about these Switch 2 editions. I am not a person who is capable of appreciating the idea of the frame rate in the Korok Forest being higher in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
To me, this is just my bias. I can't fathom that being a selling point.
Yeah.
I understand that the frame rate is higher. To me, that has no bearing on the experience. Mm-hmm. So when I look at something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Starcross Worlds, I just think to myself, okay, well, I'm excited to play the new levels, but I don't really see myself buying a Switch 2 edition that's predicated on tech outside of Prime 4, because not only is Prime 4 a much bigger gap between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 editions, but that's also a forthcoming thing, right? So when I'm playing Prime 4 for the first time, I want the better thing.
Yeah.
I
mean, the interesting thing about Prime 4 and the reason why we both didn't even list it initially as Switch 2 editions is it is a Switch 2 edition, but it's a cross-gen game. I mean, it's really no different than Miles Morales being on PS4, PS5. And so I actually think it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a bigger gap. I actually don't think that's necessarily true. I think Prime 4 on Switch 1, from what we've seen, looks great and runs great. And that also was true for Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and Kirby, which are the three other ones sort of on our mind. But those games also, I think, have bigger frame rate issues that presumably Prime 4 will not have that are now fixed in the Switch 2 versions. And so I actually don't think there's as big of a jump, especially because there's not new content in Prime 4, which is not true about those other three versions that we mentioned, even if it's relatively limited story content app integration on Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild. I think you're kind of wrong about that, but I agree with the general sentiment of number one, we didn't have a particularly big interest in trying Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and Kirby. Yeah. I might dabble in each of them, but I'm not looking forward to them. And then what we did play was, we've never played Metroid Prime 4 before, and we played the Switch 2 version, and it, as we'll talk about, looked and ran great. So I have no internal metric of how much better it is, other than I know I could use mouse mode, versus the Switch 1 one, because I never played that game before.
You should watch what Good Vibes Gaming did comparing the Switch 1 and Switch 2 versions of Prime 4. It actually is a pretty massive gulf in that there's a you should just watch it and you can decide if how accurate it being a bigger jump feels. But the one we did spend any significant amount of time with is Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV. I think that this actually unsold me on the idea of making the upgrade here. Yeah. I thought that
primarily into the camera, because this is the game that is not just you pay $20 for the extra content and presumably it looks and runs better, but it's fucking Mario Party, you jackass. But you also need to spend $50 on a camera in order to actually appreciate that content or utilize it.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're essentially looking at is a game that we both bought for $60 in October, with the camera, with the expansion before tax, is $130, right?
Yes.
And obviously, even if you already have the base game, you're still looking at adding $70 onto your purchase, which is a new game. And I don't think I've said this
in July of 2025. You can either buy Donkey Kong Bonanza for $70, or there's probably another major third-party game out that month for $70, or you can get the old Mario Party game with maybe, let's be generous and say 40 minutes of new content for $70.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to everybody. Nobody appreciates the reference. Leave a comment below if you appreciate the reference. It's very WarioWare snapped coded. It is.
I mean, I've played that game, but I don't appreciate the reference. In fact, I dislike it.
It's pretty superfluous. It's pretty pretty basic stuff you're doing with the mouse, and even more basic stuff you're doing with the camera. I think, interestingly, it feels like a lot of the illustration of the hardware gimmicks have been offloaded to this game, opposed to a brand new all dancing IP from EPD4 that would demonstrate everything that Switch 2 has to offer. A lot of this demonstration is being done through. Yeah, but even that, we don't even think uses the camera.
There probably is a mode. I'm gonna be completely
That's
honest.
fair. There probably is something. But at least from as of what we know right now, Nintendo's pushing Jamboree as like this is the big vector through which you can engage with all this gimmicky stuff. And I would be totally on board if it felt like there was a more substantial offering there. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like there is. So it was a pretty big miss for me, the Jamboree 100%. TV stuff we played.
Yeah, I think it's for me it is specifically the camera as an additional price that makes it something that I will not engage in. I thought that the variety of the mini games that we got to try some mouse ones, we got to try some camera ones. I'm excited to see. I thought they were fun enough. I had a good enough time with them, not any more or less than I had other Mario Party mini games. I'm interested to see a new game that fully integrates all of this kind of content because I have played a solid amount of Jamboree, and so if Switch 2 had a camera pre-installed on it, like the gamepad did, and I didn't have to buy an extra $50 thing, if I could pay $15, $20 for the new version and that was it, and then I could experience all this new stuff, yeah, I'd probably be okay with that. But it adds up to play this new stuff, the price of a new game. Even if you own the original version, which is crazy. All these other ones, you can say, it's basically like buying a DLC. The fuck? My light stand just fell apart. I didn't even touch it. Weird. These other ones like Kirby, it's like you're basically buying a new DLC for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, $10 upgrade. It does look a lot better. I think those are more justifiable. You can't say that about Mario Party because you're actually spending a $70 upgrade to get that game. And so, I thought they were fun enough. But if Jamboree had not come out last year, and there was a new Mario Party game called Super Mario Party Jamboree Year 1 on the system that featured all these things, I'd probably buy it, frankly. And I'd probably buy the camera for it. But because I already own the game and I'm not able to get a smaller upgrade for that then gets me access to this new content, it's a harder mental sell because it's split up in a different way than these other games.
Yeah, I mean, John and I also play a lot of Jamboree, and it's a great game, and the side modes are cool, but the side modes are also fairly shallow, so I don't have much intrinsic confidence that they would be able to make up for that high additional cost by having Jamboree TV be a really substantive side mode. Yeah. So yeah, Rikali asked generally how we feel if we think that these additions are worth it. From your point of view, I guess this is we can end this segment here by thinking about this. For me, I'm definitely buying the Kirby one, and I'm definitely buying the Prime one. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to buy the Zelda ones you get for free as part of NSO. I'm not going to play them. How about that's probably a better way to frame it. And I'm not going to buy the Jamboree one. Are you going to? Which ones are you going to buy?
No, I'm. For me, it would just be the cross-gen games of Prime and CA, because those are new video games that are available on that system. And the news has come out that the red cartridge does include all of its Switch 2 patches, so it is basically a native version of that game. Yeah. I'll play those. I might dabble in the Zelda ones, and I might be able to try the extra Kirby levels because you're buying it digitally, but I'm not buying Kirby, I'm not buying Jamboree, and I'm not buying physical copies of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. So it's a very limited thing that I don't have to engage with, which I think is nice. But it does get me native Switch 2 versions of 2 upcoming Nintendo games, and those is how I'll play them. But yeah, I'm not particularly sold on them. But I do think that I think that $10 as an upgrade for each of these is a fine deal. I'm not actually particularly upset about the pricing or the content because also again with Kirby it's basically like paying for $20.
Kirby's $20. They're not all $10.
No, I know that's what I'm saying. But it's just not for me. So I'm not. Yeah. I don't need to replay these games anyway. But if I eventually, when I want to, for each of these games, it's probably how I will play them.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk now about Prime 4. How about it itself being
escalating
an addition game?
Excitement.
So to me, this was by far wasn't even close. My highlight of the show. I have said many times that Prime 4 is probably the most excited I've been for any game ever, and that continues to hold true.
Now that you played it, yeah.
Yeah, what we played is exactly what was shown on Treehouse, which is, unless there's some sort of clever editing being employed, the unabridged first 15 minutes of out of the game.
Yeah.
Sort of the leading up to the inciting incident, which will take us to Vuros. It's very, very, very similar to the Frigate Orphean opening in Metroid Prime 1. To that end, it is beautiful. It is responsive in exactly the way I wanted it to be. It really, to me, does just feel like I'm playing a Metroid Prime game that came out in like 2009, right after Prime 3, instead of coming out in 2025. And that gave me real confidence that, down to the feel of the character, if you're coming into this game as a longtime Metroid Prime fan who wants more of that experience, retro, not only through their storied talent, but also through the work of remastering Prime 1, have really gotten back in the zone and found that feeling again. Yeah. And so I was just smitten with it. I thought the cutscenes are beautiful. I like the situation that Samus is in, and I think, generally speaking, even though this slice of the game is not representative of what the moment-to-moment gameplay for the rest of Metroid Prime 4 is going to be, in fact, I would say that there's probably more combat in a smaller period of... There's more... The combat per square inch of this game is probably literally 10 times higher than the combat per square inch of the rest of the game compared to the demo.
Sure. Yeah, probably.
I was just over the moon about it, and I really, really, really can't wait. And it remains the thing from Nintendo this year that I want the most.
Sure. Yeah. So, and quickly about the mouse controls, you said you tried them, wasn't very comfortable, and you switched back to just playing it traditional style.
Yeah, and I switched
regular style.
Right, yeah. I went to regular style. I switched back briefly for key points, like hitting a boss's weak point and things like that.
Which is an interesting amount of flexibility that it offers you, where you don't even have to go into a menu to switch it. So if you do want to aim at a thing on a door, do it. Just turn your wrist. And 100%. So even someone like you that might not find it very comfortable, it might be something where you can situationally utilize technology, and it'll make the play experience just a little bit more fluid because you have that option.
Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, it'd be interesting if I end up playing mostly the Pro Controller, I end up playing.
Oh, that's a good point.
With the Joy-Cons. But yeah,
you might even be able to just have the Joy-Con like next to you and pick them up when you want to.
I wonder. That'd be interesting. But yeah, I only have glowing things to say about Prime 4 personally.
Yeah. There was nothing in this demo. I mean, honestly, this was by far the least interesting demo I played. Not because the technology wasn't utilized. I actually think this is the game that best showed off the mouse con. It wasn't tiring like Dragon Drive, and it wasn't 5 minutes like Mario Party, and it wasn't actually just a tech demo like Welcome Tour. But mouse mode, very well utilized here. I immediately gravitated towards it in the boss battle. I rotated my wrist, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to try to play it like regular style with like a video game. And I immediately was like, nope, okay, can't hit shit. Bo noted that if the mouse controls feel a lot better when you turn up the sensitivity. Sure. Did not do that, so I'm certainly going to bump up sensitivity when I'm playing the game for myself. But I was really let down by this demo. Like you said with Kirby, my demo for Metroid Prime 4 was when I played Metroid Prime Remastered a couple of years ago. This game is no different. Well, how about this? This demo is no different than any other Metroid Prime game. This is the exact pacing, the exact controls, the exact environment design of the other Metroid Prime games, which can certainly be a pro, and I appreciate that. But I didn't feel like this was a step up in any particular way. Of course, resolution is better. I thought the cutscenes did look great, as you mentioned. But from the environment design to the way Samus controls, I didn't see anything new here. There's a note here from Rico Lee, who asks, do the psychic powers feel like a substantial addition? And does
we didn't get to play that part.
They weren't available, which I think is another reason why big asterisk on this as a demo. You were right. This is not representative of the moment-to-moment gameplay, and I think not a good example of what Metroid Prime 4 probably does in terms of evolving the formula, because we didn't have access to any of the new gameplay elements. This was the exact combat and weapons and abilities of the other Prime games. And structure and pacing wise, I felt like I'd done it all already. So I was very, very underwhelmed by it. But it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily less excited for the full game, because I know that there are elements in terms of exploration and combat that will feel substantially new.
Yeah.
But this, I think, was a very poor example of Metroid Prime 4 as a new experience, because, again, other than mouse controls, it was really no different from the other Prime games.
Yeah, I mean, Rikali asks here, is Prime 4 beyond worth the insane wait? For me, the answer is yes. And I hear what you're saying. I think that the challenge that Nintendo has is twofold when it comes to this game. You talk about Metroid Prime Remastered for you being like your quote-unquote demo for what Prime 4 is going to be like. That game didn't sell especially well. So most people are going to be, or I think in Nintendo's view, most people going to this event have perhaps never played Metroid Prime before.
I think that's very likely, yeah.
And so I think they picked a slice of the game that introduces the basics and also is the most mainstream portion of the game. Sure. It's a portion of the game full of action and full of these really beautiful pre-rendered cutscenes and these set pieces with the Galactic Federation. So I get why they've done it this way. I think that is an understandable marketing decision.
Yeah.
And I think that what it's doing is in some ways admitting the fact that this is the dream game for Metroid Prime fans, and that is its intent. And so I think that part of my personal frustration around the discussion of Metroid Prime 4 is that I think that there's been like a shift from Metroid Prime 4 representing this like ultimate example of the fact that Nintendo is listening to the community and giving us the game, giving the hardcore community the game they've wanted for so long. And then because we sort of had to watch its development get restarted, because we had to watch it get bundled in with Switch 2 stuff, it sort of gained this burden, which I think is in part fair and in part unfair, of being a more revolutionary title than from what we've seen it was ever going to try and be. Sure. And so it being worth the wait, I think, really just depends on what you're coming to this for. I think if you're coming for the next chapter of Metroid Prime and you've been waiting for that and that is what you're after, this is 100% worth the wait. It's exactly what you want it to be. But I think if you fall outside of that group of people, it simply might not be. It simply might be another thing to bounce off of. And I understand that being disappointing, but I also think that there has been a really like long shadow cast over the intent of this game, which is to simply let people be in this world more and iterate on it. And we talk about the importance of iteration sometimes. And I think that after a long wait, it's really cool to reinvent, but there's also something to be said for saying, hey, we've got an audience that loves this formula. We've got a new story to tell. We've got some new ideas to implement. Yeah. Let's go ahead and make that happen. So
totally appreciate that. Yeah.
We'll see. Tucker, do you want to now do Donkey Kong or do you want to do Mario Kart? Because we're ending on the other one.
The one we don't pick, correct?
Yeah.
Because those are the last topics. Let's talk about Mario Kart. Mario Kart is where we started. It is definitely the game that we were given most access to, and it's also the game that we got the best understanding of the breadth of, because we were able to play multiple modes here. Our demo was structured in a couple of chunks. First step was just play a Grand Prix. You and I got to stand next to each other and play on two separate TVs. We obviously got to go through character selection, select which couple we wanted to play. We played a couple of them. We played one on the TV, one on handheld. And then we were moved to a different room in which it was the knockout tour mode. 24 people, all of these screens, all of the Nintendo employees counting down and cheering and making it like this big hullabaloo. Easily the best demo of the entire thing, because they shaped the shit around it. They're like, okay, here's what's interesting about Mario Kart is that there is this mode, and so we'll have all these TVs and we'll have it be this big event, but we'll also give you access to explore in the free roam just for a little bit before the match starts. We'll give you we'll let you play knockout, but we'll also let you play the Grand Prix mode. And so I think that while there's still a lot more to learn about this game, This was definitely the best introduction to one of these games, and I think they knew that. That's why they started with it, because they really did understand how this game should be demoed in its variety and in its energy. And this is the one that I was already excited about going in, but this demo, going hands-on with it, was like, and more than likely it was also partially the energy and the camaraderie of the whole thing, but
Totally.
left a giant impact on me. I thought it was a fantastic way to start the event, especially.
Yeah, I have many thoughts on Mario Kart World. I think that one of my overarching thoughts is that I agree with you that this was of the demos we played, perhaps the most ideal one. However, there were still two big caveats on it.
Yes, that's definitely true.
One, and this goes from friends who talked to, everybody's preview. This is not just a public event. Everybody was on 100cc and everybody had steering assist turned on.
Bro, what are you doing?
If you don't play a lot of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, steering assist stops you from falling off the track, but it also stops you from going off a pretty narrow spline along the track. Yeah. So you have actually not a lot of flexibility when you're playing with steering assist on. I think steering assist is an amazing feature because it allows me to play Mario Kart with so many different people. But it is restrictive if you're used to playing 150cc or 200cc with no steering assist on. So 100%. I honestly can't give you a verdict, even though I've played literally thousands of hours of Mario Kart in my life, as to whether this game feels good to play or not. I can't do it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to waive any thoughts on that. That sort of pushes my thoughts on the game to other dimensions of the experience, some of which I'm wildly positive about, like Knockout Tour, and others of which I am fairly skeptical of, which is the sort of moment-to-moment track design. Mm-hmm. Tucker, are there any questions here in particular you think would be good to take us a little bit deeper into our thoughts on Mario Kart?
Scruffy says, was there any indication that you can disable the drive between courses on a Grand Prix for a more traditional 3-lap structure? No. The maps are not designed for that. They are all like Mount Wario or that one F-Zero level where it's a straight line, quote unquote. They don't loop around, and so it's not. I don't think it's possible for that to have a lap structure.
Well, I think Scrappy's asking a slightly different question. He's asking if you have to always end one course by driving off of it and immediately rolling into the next one. That we don't know about.
No, I guess we don't. Yeah, I guess it is possible, maybe for more competitive or something like that. I'm not sure. But in the second part of the thing, traditional 3-lap structure, I say goodbye to that. That's not happening.
Yeah, as far as we know, every track is 3 segments instead of 3 laps.
It is possible that there's an alternate mode where older tracks are brought back and that or new tracks that are designed for laps. But there were no tracks that we've seen in this game, and certainly none that we played on, that have a 3-lap structure.
We have a question here from Rikali, who asks, do Grand Prix and Knockout Tour in Mario Kart World feel different enough for both to be separate modes, and do the intermissions feel engaging between driving on the tracks? I think it's important to note, and at least in my view, that Knockout Tour is a incredibly substantial part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That and Grand Prix do really feel like they're pillars that will stand alongside each other. Grand Prix might be more fun, at least from what I've seen, when you're playing locally or you're playing single player, but I think that Knockout Tour is really going to be the bread and butter of the online experience. At least I think it's going to be for me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And this is one that when we sat down and we played it, and again, with the caveat that we had to have lower CC and had to have the driving controls on, which neither of us are holding against the game. We're maybe holding against the structure of the demo a little bit, because we know you're going to be able to turn off driving assist in the fucking real video game when we buy it. And of course, there'll be higher CCs. We don't know if there's 200. There probably is. I don't see why they would remove that. But this is one when we sat down and we played it, and it just fucking went. And you're like, how did it take them this long to make this a thing? Because it is fantastic. It is ostensibly the tension of the last 1 minute of any given Mario Kart race extended into a fucking 15-minute play session. And it is a totally different energy experience. And on top of that, one of the more base elements of this game that I think is a big plus for me is 24 people, all of this chaos, lots of bouncing off of people and items everywhere. There's so much energy in this game because of multiple design decisions that they made, primarily the amount of people, but then applying that to something where it gets whittled down and whittled down. I thought it was fantastic. Again, it's like, how did it take them so long to get to this? Because this feels like there should have always been these two modes going next to one another, and I just thought it was excellent, and a totally different vibe. Like, I've played so much Mario Kart in my life, and for me, at a certain point, it's like I'm very much going through the motions. I'm not a particularly competitive person in most cases, so I don't really care if I get first or not. But this energy shifts that vibe enough for even someone like me to really feel like there's a pressure that Mario Kart traditionally doesn't have, because you're because it's just going and going and going. It's an endurance thing as well, and it makes items feel a lot different in their usage, because you're always gearing towards getting to that first slot. You can't just like hang in the back for the entire race until the end. You've always got to be fighting for that front, and so I thought it was fantastic.
I 100% agree. I think it's a complete revelation. I mean, I've played so much F-Zero 99, and that is this sensibility in Mario Kart. Yeah. And I think that just works extremely, extremely well. It sells the game for me alone.
Sure.
The
well, I think the Mario and the kart part probably
that's fair.
The game for you.
That's fair. But to me, if it was just Mario Kart as we knew it, and then also Knockout Tour, for me that would be enough. Yeah. Obviously, the game is way more than that, but I just say that to sort of illustrate that I think that this provides such a substantial change to the formula that it is going to make for a really fun and fresh view of Mario Kart competition.
This is going to be the thing that people take away from the game. Well, I mean, more than likely, in terms of the reason why people love Mario Kart is that competitive energy and the wackiness and the goofiness and all of the chaos that comes from items and stuff. That's all of those best parts of Mario Kart put in with a different spin. That this is going to be the reason why people love this game, if it really clicks with them. There are, of course, the other elements of the free roam, and of course the differing track design that I think, again, we have working off of limited information. I think those may be a little bit more controversial, but I do think that I believe that unanimously Knockout Tour will be the reason why people like this game.
Yeah, I think the one group that it won't be good for is people who are maybe playing more casually, who aren't as good at Mario Kart. That's why I like that this is like represents a different, and I think more specifically competitive mode, because I don't often feel compelled to play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe online, just because I prefer to play it with a little bit more loose and a little bit more casually with Jean in local multiplayer, doing Grand Prix and versus mode and everything. So I like that it feels like they really purpose-built something for people that want to be a little bit more of a sicko about Mario Kart. Chris asks about the free roam. We didn't really get to experience it. We got to free roam
about 3 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, very briefly while the Knockout Tour is being set up. I found what looked like a U.S. coin, like a quarter that had Princess Peach's silhouette on it.
Yeah, so did I.
And the Nintendo rep told me to tune into the Direct next week for more information about that. Yeah. So much like the feel of the game, I'm reserving judgment on the free roam, because it seems like there is a lot to know about that is being held back. And I certainly hope there is, because my reservation since seeing free roam in the Direct last week is that I don't necessarily think it is fun enough of a proposition in terms of the movement of Mario Kart to just screw around in a sandbox area. I need there to be stuff in there, and it sounds like when we get the Direct next week there will be. But otherwise, I don't think at least don't have much to say about free roam.
No, I actually agree with something you said. I'm sold on it conceptually, because it does feel like a markedly different element that Mario Kart has obviously never had before, and I'm interested to see how they handle it. I am very positive on the general open world Mario Kart idea. I think that the way that they have like all these different elements to quote unquote track design that you don't do in the main maps, where you can go up onto buildings and stuff like that, and there are just streets and full cities and stuff. It does feel like they put a lot of effort into it, so I'm very excited about it. But from the chunk that I played, again, very, very limited, and more than likely with a lot of stuff stripped out in terms of progression and general content. It felt slow. Like, I felt like I was like piddling along these hills, and I was in a desert, and it was like the sand was a little bit sticky, I think, and so I felt like I was going through it very, very slowly, and I'm like, well, that's not great. I don't know if I want to be going slowly through a bland desert. I think it's possible I think it's likely that those fears are allayed by what we learn about the overall experience. But I'm excited for it, but we were not given enough time, and we were not given enough actual game to know if this is something we're going to love. So it's something I'm sold on a concept, but I can't say that I was more excited by actually having hands on the sticks on this particular demo.
Wrigley also asks a question that I think is very, very, very important here. Do the tracks have any set pieces or tighter turns like 8 Deluxe? Because I've been kind of worried about that. Here's where we get into more nuanced Mario Kart talk than most people are going to want.
Yeah.
I am incredibly skeptical about the track design for this game.
Sure.
And I have been largely skeptical about the direction with which Mario Kart track design has been trending.
Yeah.
Really, it started with Mario Kart 8 with these sort of longer segmented tracks, which I like in concept, but feel like they're unevenly applied. Sure. Like Mount Wario, I think, is amazing. I think N64 Rainbow Road is not. But especially the tour tracks, which are open and sort of reroute you as you're racing.
Yeah.
I've been very skeptical of those, and now having played again, I've probably only played 4 tracks from the game between. Knockout, we were playing more tracks appended into each other, but even when we were playing the more individual Grand Prix races, I think that the track design is really skewing Mario Kart's moment-to-moment gameplay in a way that I am not sure is for the better, personally.
Sure.
The tracks are very wide open because now we've got 24 racers, and I will say 24 racers can feel like a real clusterfuck sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fun in Knockout Tour. It was fun when you're all, bouncing off of each other and there's a shit ton of items. It reminds me of when you're really in the thick of it in F-Zero 99. I think that's fine. I think that's cool. But the tracks are so wide and there's so many disparate paths to go off on. Daniel asks about rail grinding. Rail grinding is just one of many things that are in the levels. You kind of just... like a telephone wire might start at an angle, right, and then it'll flatten out. So you drive up the angle and you flatten out and go along the wire. There's so much going on. The tracks are so wide. I feel like it has an effect on the skill ceiling, because Mario Kart is about the items and the randomness. Yes, 100%. But you have to be good at racing to be competitive beyond the items. You have to be able to take a corner well. You have to know when you can cut across the grass. You have to really take advantage of everything that's on the track. And that's helped by the fact that a lot of track design is super memorable with big set piece moments. Like you're playing DK Mountain, you're going around these, like, you're slaloming your way around these mountains, and you can jump over portions of the track if you're skilled enough. And I'm not saying that stuff isn't in Mario Kart World, because we don't 100% know yet. But what I did feel immediately was that the tracks felt like they were less cohesive from an art design perspective, then they felt less interesting by being themed more around the real world. And most damagingly, in my view, is that it really felt like I needed an item or I had no chance. And I think that is not entirely true in other Mario Kart titles, wherein if you can get a better racing line, if you can cut a little bit of the grass off, you can get a good extra trick here, you can progress along. But I felt myself often when playing Knockout Tour in particular, where your position at any moment was in jeopardy, I was just waiting for the next item box as I'm in these super wide corridors, and I don't feel like I had any opportunity to through skill or through tech get an edge up. Now, again, this is a worry opposed to a hard criticism, because I've not seen all the tracks. We played a limited amount. Again, I had steering assist on, so my movement was already limited.
You couldn't even do the secrets or the tricks.
100%.
Yeah.
But I am concerned about
it. What I think is going to be interesting is also, for the first time in a very long time, these are new Mario Kart tracks. And so your mindset, especially in our demo and what's going to be for people getting the game at launch, is you have to actually learn the tracks and know their secrets and know their pathways and know the nuances to be able to do those. And this Mario Kart team has designed enough of these tracks to know that it's important to have those elements. And so I think for me, as someone who's not as hardcore into Mario Kart, I think that these are much better because they offer a wider sense of variety and spectacle than the ones on 8 Deluxe do. You're not looping around, which means there's always a sense of forward momentum. And also what it allows for is for each individual track to have a sense of internal variety. I remember this part where we were going between like these really cool like Arizona mesas and like we ended up like going by a beach, and then we ended up sort of in this city that reminded me of that coastal electric city from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and like we were driving on these solar panels and then going up on power lines and stuff, and I'm like, there's such a sense of flow and spectacle and variety in these, which are I don't think mostly present in the previous Mario Kart tracks, because most of them are very locked down to one specific theme, which can of course be very interesting, but I think that for me it's a lot more engaging here to explore these tracks and see the ways in which they feel like they can be internally coherent, but still offer a sense of variety. It feels like a lot harder of a thing to balance for me, and so I was a lot more impressed when I was transitioning from one area of a map to another, because they had to find a way to make it feel like a natural progression. And so I thought they were very cool. And I'm excited to just see what a new level of, this is basically next generation Mario Kart track design. And the way that there was the jump from 8 Deluxe or from 8 to Tour, right? That those had a different sort of design sensibility. We're on to another one. And I think it's probably because they realized that people weren't enjoying the Tour design as much. And also, that was designed for touchscreen. But we're on to the next one. And that for me is a big thing, because I've always felt that Mario Kart track design was relatively samey, even when they introduced anti-gravity and they introduced the underwater and the gliding and stuff. Those are all basically still the same. And so I think that incorporating all of that and redesigning it from the ground up for these tracks to feel more expansive and have a wider sense of variety, I think is a massive, massive deal for me to feel more engaged by the tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only other point on that is I think that there's a lot more continuity between this and Tour than I was hoping for there to be.
Sure.
Particularly having now played the Tour maps a lot in Mario Kart Deluxe, since they are largely present there. I think part of it for me is also theming, because I get what you're saying about there being a real novelty to seeing the track change in real time, the scenario. And I agree. I think that is also cool. But I think that part of what the Tour tracks lost by being real world locations was that they sort of lost a more particular sense of identity. And I think that these are feeling that way as well. But it's a trade-off, as you're saying, because you get, you're going through a town, and then you're going onto the roofs, and then you're going out onto the beach and everything. Yeah. And that, I think, has its own sense of identity. But what I think, for me at least, is more interesting is this track is built around the idea of what if Waluigi had a pinball machine and you're in it, right? Mm-hmm. And the theming feels a little bit more close to the bone.
Sure.
But we're just going to have to see. Again, this is all...
We also have a very limited sense of what the track design is, because, to be fair, there also are wacky-ass tracks. We were on a fucking, like, Sweets level or whatever. Like, it's not like they've completely abandoned more surrealistic track concepting. And so it'll just be interesting to see how they mesh those two together.
Totally. And one track that I really want to play that we didn't get to try was this, like, 75-meter inspired one.
Yeah. Very cool.
Which also still opens up concerns of mine with these very long corridor-based design, but it also has set piece to it, right? So I think we're just gonna have to see how the tracks shake out in the end. Like I said, I've got concerns about it, but I think there's almost no chance that this doesn't immediately end up in my top games ever, right?
Yeah. And one other element that I know you're not mixed on is the characters,
amazing,
and costumes, and the variety. We sat there and we just looked at all these different characters and costumes they had, and we're just like, what the heck? I mean, the amount of care put it into all the variety of the different characters and costumes, I think is really, really fantastic. You look at, obviously, Donkey Kong has a slightly different design, which I know you greatly, greatly appreciate.
Yes, I love
We'll
that.
talk about that more in a Bonanza conversation. But I was just looking at, like, at Peach and Luigi, and, like, seeing the ways in which they're, like, their skin tone and the light, like, reflecting off of them offers, like, a greater sense of, like, bounciness and vivacity. I thought that it was really fantastic, and I was especially blown away by... We had a very limited access to what the costumes were, but each one was a complete surprise. When I ended up playing my first track as Explorer Baby Daisy, I was like, all right, I'm in. Like, I will never play as Baby Daisy in these previous games, but they had, like, Builder Baby Luigi, and they had Fisherman Lakitu, and he had, like, this cool little straw hat on, and Soft Serve Toadette, like, and of course that Toad with, like, a burger as his head. Like, they're really reaching outside of the bounds instead of just, like, putting them in, like actual costumes. They're, like, changing their design in fun ways, and they all look so good. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's the best thing that Tor did, and they're doubling down on that here. So I agree completely.
Yeah, and apparently there's gonna be 10 costumes for every character. Holy fuck!
Yeah. Let's talk now about the last game we played. Literally, it was how we ended our preview session. We got to play, what did you say, maybe 15 minutes or so of
right.
Donkey Kong Bonanza. We got to play, for people who watch the Treehouse, we got to play, like, the first half of the introductory area on Ingot Isle, and then the game cuts.
Oh, it's only half?
Yeah.
Oh, because there's, like, a cutscene thing. Yeah.
And then you have to go, you do a whole other part to get Odd Rock and things.
Which we did not do. Yeah.
It cuts, and you end up in the whole game takes place underground, but you're in one of the underground strata that's, like, the blue and yellow beachy area. Again, This is on the Treehouse.
Something Lagoon, yeah.
Yeah, and Tucker, what did you think of this? We had a very little bit of tutorialization at the beginning to show you how to play, and then you're just you're kind of left to your own devices, particularly in this lagoon area, to just go wherever you want, destroy the environment, collect bananas. What's your thinking on this game? The most unique game we played, for sure.
Easily, yeah, and that's why I would say it's the most intriguing game that I played. Because, and I've been making a stink about this in our conversations about it after. There's not a game like this, and so when I'm plopped into a demo and I'm trying, I am so used to video game pacing and design and understanding how level elements and abilities work in video games, and I'm plopped into this fucking Donkey Kong game where you can dig and spin on a rock and climb shit and throw shit, and I'm fighting enemies in different ways. It is a lot to take in, and frankly, I think that this is probably the best way to demo this game, but I also think this is a game that does not demo very well, because it is something that, in terms of exploration and understanding of your just base character abilities, of the way that you can move through the environment, I was struggling to, like, understand how I was supposed to progress through things and what abilities I could do as Donkey Kong that would make it feel smooth. This was a very chunky experience because I felt like I was fighting against Donkey Kong's controls because, again, I haven't played a character that controls in this way and has these abilities before. But that also, I think, means that it has the greatest ceiling to surprise me once I'm able to get my hands on the sticks myself in the full game experience, in terms of there is a better way to introduce you to this game with a, as we know, longer introductory sequence with some more challenges that are a little more scripted to teach you what your abilities are. We were ostensibly plopped from, okay, here's how the very basic controls work, to a full level. And I understand the drive to want to show what the sort of scope of a single level of this game is. There's a question from Regally who asks, where's the fucking Donkey Kong section?
It's not in there. I have it here, though.
DK question, is the game open world? Oh, no, it's from Daniel. Is the game open world?
But Rickley also asks, does DK Bonanza feel as open as Odyssey? And I think this is the more precise question asked, because it's not open world.
No, it's open zone. It's kind of like a Sonic Frontiers-esque kind of thing. No, it's a lot like Odyssey. But I again, it has a high ceiling to surprise me, because once I understand the game on its level a little bit better, as opposed to, like, being dropped into it and trying to figure things out as I was going, I think I'll be a lot more appreciative of its design. But the demo was chunky. I had a difficult time with it. It was interesting, but not immediately enjoyable, because I don't think the
Yeah.
demo gave you the best look into what this game is if you're able to understand it from its level a little bit better. That the full game will more than likely have.
Yeah. I don't know about this one. I don't know about Donkey Kong Bonanza. I think I echo basically everything you said. I think it's so exciting that presumably EPD8, the 3D Mario team, said, okay, what can we make that's unique to Donkey Kong? And as you're saying, doesn't play like anything else that we've experienced before. And they did that. I think to me, to situate this among some other massive Nintendo touchstones is that I think it has a lot of Odyssey sensibilities in terms of not the exact type of movement, but the flow of movement. The way you can sort of chain together Donkey Kong's rolls and jumps reminds me a lot of playing as Mario in Odyssey. And it also has the player-driven design philosophy, sandbox philosophy of particularly Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like the game is sort of owing itself in part to both, but as you're saying, nonetheless, it is a very singular game. I'm talking more about we're taking like philosophical cues from these other games. But we have this question here from Scruffy who asks, does digging through the walls in the ground actually feel intuitive? With the obvious obstacles not being able to see through the walls in the ground, did it feel like you had a good grasp on where you actually were in a level? My answer is no, at least based on the demo. The game has punches mapped to 3 of the 4 face buttons. You jump with A, you punch down with B, you punch forward with Y, and you punch up with X, which makes sense to an extent, 100%. And it's necessary for a game world wherein almost everything is destructible. But I think that it lacks, as you were saying, the immediacy of a game like Odyssey. I agree with you. I think the immediate fun is not as present as it was when you immediately take control in the Cap Kingdom.
Yeah.
Or what it reminds me a lot of, actually, in some ways, like playing Mario Sunshine, where you have to learn the nuances of FLUDD. And I find myself wondering if this game is leaning too far in the direction of its concept, of this sensibility of there's Banandium chips hidden in every wall, and everything can be destroyed, and everything can be picked up or yanked out of the ground.
Yeah.
I think that for me, especially, this is going to dovetail a lot with my feelings on Tears of the Kingdom. I think that there's a Goldilocks zone, right? And this feels like a game that is falling outside of that. And that is cool. It's going to be brash. It's going to be new. It's going to be action-packed. But I don't know if it's going to be ideal. It reminds me, this is another way that it reminds me of Sunshine. It feels like we've got a lot going on here. And it all feels kind of disparate. I feel like there's just so many things happening. And I'm concerned about feeling like I have to smash through everything to find collectibles. I felt like some collectibles really made sense and led me to them, and others I just kind of had to stumble upon. Yeah. So I'm not so sure about DK Bonanza. I will be there day one. Donkey Kong is my child. He's my son. He's never been more expressive. I think the game is going to be at least provocative in a way that I didn't find Odyssey 3D World to be. If those are polished games, if Odyssey's innovative in some ways, this is truly something new. And if any team deserves the benefit of the doubt, it's EPD8. And so I really can't wait to see what's what, but I am definitely very mixed in the demo.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. I think this is the kind of game where I don't share. I think, did you use the word skepticism, or no? That was from Mario Kart.
I'm skeptical of the track design. I don't know what I'd be of. Maybe I said that for this game. I don't know. Wary. Yeah. I'm intrigued. Sure. I'm very intrigued by how this is going to pan out. How about?
Yeah, I even if I do share a lot of the same first blush frustrations and I guess confusion with Donkey Kong Bonanza, my prevailing thought process on this game, even after playing a demo that I don't think introduced me to it particularly well, is that someone's doing something new. Holy shit, I can't fucking wait. Like, and even if it doesn't work as well as the tried and true 3D platformer formula that has been iterated on over the course of 25, 30 years, finally someone's doing something totally different. And it reminds me of the ways, like you mentioned Sunshine, but I think something like Luigi's Mansion is another game that I think is really compelling in that it controls in a way that no other game does.
Yeah.
And so this is, and also I think it's important for a game like Luigi's Mansion or Donkey Kong Bonanza to match energy and gameplay style to characters' abilities that gives them their own distinct feel. Because Donkey Kong 64 is a rare 3D platformer.
Yeah.
There's a number of those that it's in very direct conversation with. But there's not for DK Bonanza. Odyssey is the closest. That game was almost a decade ago at this point.
Yeah.
And so even if it doesn't work for me, I'm excited that it's happening. But there's a chance that it's, a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 game for me where I'm like, yeah, it's exciting that they did this, but ultimately because it is also trying something new, it doesn't actually quite work. But then, hey, maybe we get a Bonanza 2, 6 years down the line that polishes it up a little bit, restricts a few things, is a little bit more linear, and that ends up becoming the game that like really things are leading to. But I think for me, I'm very, very willing to give leeway for things that aren't immediately gratifying, because what it means is that something innovative is being attempted. And that's something that we can't say about a lot of games nowadays.
I definitely agree. I guess I think you just have a more, I think you're more willing for the game to be a 6 than I am, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I play that and think to myself, man, this is the game I've wanted for so long, and I played it, and my immediate thought process isn't, I love this. Sure. And to me, that's a bummer, right? But I agree with you in the main that ultimately what we have here is a fundamentally different platformer that's a lot closer to an action beat 'em up game. You're just beating up the environment, and that's interesting. And it, as you're saying, dovetails with the character. It's akin to Luigi's Mansion. I think that's actually a really good analog to draw, a better analog than Sunshine. I just hope that it pans out as well as I want it to. And I'm definitely more harsh on it because this is a game that I never thought would happen. I never thought we would get this internally developed big Donkey Kong 3D platformer. And I just really, really, really wanted to stick the landing. And in some respects, it already is. In the movement, in the animation quality, in the art direction. There's so much that's already doing so right. And there's a chance that I can play this game and have it in my top 5 games ever. But because that chance is there, I feel like I'm more critical in the fact that we've gone so long without that EPD8 game. We've gone so long without a truly new Donkey Kong game. But my expectations are up here. Maybe it's the sort of game that I play and I think it's okay, and then 3 years later I play it again, and Donkey Kong's in a different place and I love it more. That's certainly happened in the past. So we'll see.
Because it's risky, which I think is the 100%. Thing that is like, I don't know, most intriguing about it for me is this is not this is guaranteed to sell us 15 million copies game. It's like, if people are mixed on it because it's not quite as polished and understandable as what we expect from a major Nintendo game, it could sell 5 million copies and get like a 76 on Metacritic, and then people are like, damn. But Godspeed to Nintendo for letting one of their major games this year and one of their major launch window games be a very risky move.
Yeah. Let's actually wrap up the discussion with a question to that effect, which I think nicely puts a bow on everything. Once again from Rika Lee, who asks, would you say that Mario Kart and DK Bonanza are good enough to warrant buying a system at launch? I'm waiting until the holiday myself, but I'm just curious where we both land on that. We're in an interesting position, Tucker, and I was making a joke about this the other day. 2 directs have passed now. Imminent launch of the Switch system. We have no games dated after August. And even in the case of August, that's an Editions game, right?
Yes, sure.
We only have 4 Switch 2 titles confirmed. Only Switch 2 titles confirmed for this year. Of consequence. And this is important for what I want to try to explain here. You've got Mario Kart, you've got DK Bonanza, you've got Kirby Air Ride, and you have Kirby Air Riders, and you have Hyrule Warriors.
Correct, yeah.
Now we also have Dragon Drive, and we have Welcome Tour. That's going to be cool for people who are more like us, who are interested in the weirder pockets of Nintendo history. But I would imagine that there is probably less than 10 people on the face of the globe who will buy a system for either of those games. If you're looking...
Yeah, because 0 is less than 10.
If you're looking at Mario Kart and DK Bonanza as this first opening salvo, with the understanding that a lot of what's going to be big for the rest of the year is going to be on Switch 1 as well. And then an iterative Hyrule Warriors game and a Kirby Air Riders game, which I can't wait for, but is, I think, not going to be a massive deal. It's going to be, I think, a cool, really important game, but not a barn burner. Do you think that DK Bonanza and Mario Kart is enough?
Mario Kart's enough. And that's the thing.
Sure.
Is if Switch can launch with Breath of the Wild and that game is enough, because we're talking about like the launch month or whatever, Mario Kart's definitely gonna be enough, because Mario Kart's, frankly, not in terms of being revolutionary, but it's a bigger deal than Breath of the Wild. And so that, I think that game, and from it being something that is revolutionary within the bounds of Mario Kart, for the quality that we have seen of it, for the intrigue that I still have based on the direct not having happened yet, absolutely. Bonanza, I think, is much more in the realm of something like ARMS or Pikmin 4 than I think, it's not the next tentpole Mario game. It's not Breath of the Wild and Odyssey, where the comparison would be Mario Kart World and DK Bonanza. But I think that's pretty interesting, and also because I do think it's important to stipulate that with all of those other games you mentioned, the reality is Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends ZA are Nintendo Switch 2 launch year games. And if they weren't Switch 1 games, we'd be talking about this as the best first year lineup of any Nintendo system ever. You go straight from Mario Kart into Donkey Kong into new Metroid into new Pokemon. What the fuck? But the much like people add stipulations to some PS5 games because they were cross-gen, I think people aren't necessarily giving the same amount of reverence to these titles being launch year titles for the new system because they're cross-generation, which I don't think is particularly fair. I feel the same way about PS5's cross-gen games as I do with these, particularly these two Nintendo games. But I think the launch lineup for these first 6 months of the or last 6 months, but first 6 months of Switch 2's life cycle, I think are incredible. Once you factor in all the things that for some people might have asterisks on them, but the reality is there is a very wide slate of Switch 2 content, and DK Bonanza and Mario Kart are definitely leading that. But I think it's a great first 6 months launch window.
Yeah, I framed it in a leading way because I really wanted to just be able to say, okay, I agree with you 100%. And I agree with you about 90% of the way.
Okay, sure, that's a lot.
I think that there's a difference here, right, between being a hardcore gamer, a hardcore Nintendo fan, and doing hardcore gamer accounting or doing the accounting of a regular person for whom this is not an essential purchase, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're a person with a Switch, like I have a friend, they are a massive Nintendo fan, but they are not moved to buy a Switch 2 right away because they say the two games I want, Metroid and Pokemon, are still on Switch 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an important perspective because I agree with you. The lineup that Nintendo has in 2025, encompassing everything, is if everything shakes out the way we want it to shake out, the way it looks like it's going to shake out, will perchance be my favorite year in Nintendo's history.
Sure.
Right? So for me, I couldn't be happier. I think it's going to be an astoundingly busy next couple of months, provided we actually get some hard dates soon.
Yeah.
But I do think that Hyrule Warriors does not make for a super compelling reason to buy a Switch in the holiday window.
Yeah.
I don't think DK Bonanza is a system seller either. I think Pikmin 4 is a great analog. Yeah. I think it comes back to Mario Kart. And this is a discussion for another time, though, because I think that there is a clear case for Nintendo looking at Switch 1 and saying, we blew too many massive things too early.
I agree, yeah.
And I think they're saying, well, look, Mario Kart is going to carry these 6 months, and frankly, we're going to have stock issues. We already have financial issues with the tariffs. It's going to be a tricky time. What we have here is good enough. And for a lot of people who buy it for Mario Kart, they're going to be plenty busy playing Pokemon, and so it's a game only for their system, right? So that's why I agree with you in the main, but I think it's complicated. And I think that the notion that Switch 2 is going to fail or be anything less than a solid success in year one is wrong, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised if something does go haywire and it doesn't move the way Nintendo wants it to move. I think we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot to discuss about how Nintendo balances their calendars moving forward based on what we're getting in this 6-month period. But again, in sum, we've basically said everything there is to say. I think we both have a nuanced take, but obviously both of us are over the moon and we'll be there on June 5th. So
Yeah. To close out that point about it being like there definitely being asterisks to it, I totally understand that. And I think what's interesting to me is that I think that's only because there wasn't another tentpole Switch 2 title announced in the Direct. I stipulate that because I think it is possible that we get a Summer Direct that does show off that game. That there is some sort of, maybe it's Mario Maker 3, maybe it's something like that, that is a big system-selling Switch 2 only game from a major IP that is able to come out in that window around something like Pokemon, that completely changes our tune on that. But I still think there's space to learn about that.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not 100%. Because it is still a busy next few months, especially if you consider they're selling a Kirby game, 2 Zelda games, and a Mario Party game alongside all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot. There's a lot to think about and talk about. And we'll be here to share our thoughts as things start to evolve.